last train west was nearly empty. 2 nurses and a marine. A woman feeding crossword clues into a vending machine. The guard clipped holes through destinations with ceremonial care, then looked at mine and raised an eyebrow as though nobody went there. I said, Greyhaven. He said, end of the line. Then marked the ticket twice, as if the first mark might decline. Greyhaven, don't wait up, I'm only passing through. I've told that lie in every town, but never once to you. The window gave my face back in pieces after dark. One eye above a signal box, one mouth across a park. I tried to read the evening news, the headlines would not stay. A minister denied the facts, a factory closed today. The football scores were final, the weather promised rain. Nothing in the printed world explained why I was on that train. Greyhaven, don't wait up, put nothing on the stove. I'm not the boy who left your streets with nowhere else to go. To think the future was a country with my name, where every door said private, till I arrived and made a claim. I learned to bow at curtain calls, to pause before a tear, to make a room of strangers think I'd whispered in each ear. I learned which wounds look noble, which failures sounded brave, and how regret improves with age once properly engraved. But there are nights when hotel glass catches you before the act, before the grin has found its lighting, before the lie becomes a fact. There are mornings when your own name looks borrowed on the page, and every town behind you feels like scenery from a suburbs into warehouses, the warehouses to fields. The moon flashed on the window like a coin nobody yields. Then salt appeared upon the glass, or perhaps it was the rain. And somewhere past the blackened dunes, the sea began again. The pier rose up in sections, a broken ruler in the foam. The town was smaller than the memory that had brought me home. Greyhaven, don't wait up, I see the platform train doors opened, I stepped down. The train knew where to go. They painted the railings municipal blue to prove that the council remembers the view. The pier is condemned, but the gift shop survives, selling shells made in China and simplified lives. The Grand Hotel offers a sea-facing room with breakfast, a Bible, and traces of bloom. The lift has been broken since '81, but the brochure says climbing is part of the fun. Wish you were here, preferably spending. Summer is over, the offers keep ending. Wish you were here, bring cash and good cheer. Greyhaven loves you 3 weeks of the year. The fortune machine gives professional advice for 20 new pence, sometimes 20 pence twice. It told me a journey will change who you are, then swallowed my money and flashed au revoir. The Golden Crown Arcade is half LED, half carpet, half mildew, half clinically dead. A child wins a whistle, his father wins debt. The horses keep racing without moving yet. Wish you were here, preferably thirsty. Monday is charming and Tuesday is worse. See, wish you were here, the coast is quite clear. Greyhaven loves you 3 weeks of the year. A man dressed as Nelson sells lager and chips, with gravy on trousers and salt on his lips. He says used to be queues from the station to shore, then points at 6 pensioners asleep by the door. The Winter Gardens is luxury muse. The Fisherman's Club is a place selling shoes. The cinema's bingo, the bingo's now flats. The rats have a landlord, the landlord has rats. Rename the collapse, reframe the decline. Call every crack an original line. Turn damp into character, dust into charm. Put heritage plaques on the fire alarm. I found my old face on a sun-bleached display. The Greyhaven play is 1 week only in May. My hair reached my collar, my grin reached the street. Someone had written complete little shit. I laughed for a moment, then looked round in case somebody remembered the rest of my face. Nobody did, and the wind off the sea tore 1974 off of me. Wish you were here, preferably younger. Memory is cheap, but memory gets hungrier. Wish you were here, the message is clear. Greyhaven needs you 3 weeks of the year, but not permanently. But not permanently. She was smoking beneath the old Marquee, keeping one shoulder out of the rain. I knew her before she turned towards me. She knew me and looked away again. I said, "Helen." She said, still dramatic, and dropped the cigarette under her shoe. I had carried speeches across half the country. She defeated them all with, "How are you?" I said I was working. She said, still acting. I said there had been television as well. She said she had seen me once in a hospital drama, playing a doctor who couldn't tell. I said that was years ago. She said everything is. Then asked if I still drank after a show. I said only socially. She looked at the empty street and said, "Not much society here though." She married Tom from the bakery. He gets up at 4 and complains about flour. They have 2 children, a terrier, a mortgage, and arguments lasting about half an hour. Her mother died, her father moved inland. Her eldest is studying law. She said all this without lowering her voice, as if ordinary life required no applause. She said 3 times. I said some letter may have gone astray. She said you wrote when you were frightened or drunk, and both times wanted saving that day. I said I was young. She said so was I. I said I had something to prove. She said you always mistook being watched for having somewhere to move. Told her I sometimes imagined returning and finding the life we might have lived. She said you imagine the flattering version. You never imagine what marriage gives. You never imagine the bills on the table or you after another bad review. You imagine me frozen beneath this marquee, still waiting to happen to you. I said perhaps we were meant for each other. She laughed but not cruelly at me. She said you were meant for an audience. I was meant to be free. Then Tom arrived in a bakery van. He waved through the glass and waited. No jealousy, no meaningful She kissed my cheek and said, take care, the sort of thing decent people say. Then climbed beside him and fastened her seatbelt, and ordinary life drove away. Mrs. Vale ran 17 rooms above the Golden Crown. She wore a belt of brass front door keys and never once sat down. She said breakfast 7:30, bathrooms 2nd floor. No visitors after 10 o'clock unless they pay for more. She looked at my suitcase, she looked at my shoes, she looked at the name in her register and said, you've been here before, haven't you? I said, perhaps. She said, room 9, then charged me for the view. The view was brick, a drain pipe, and a pigeon missing too. Mr. Pike in number 3 collected broken clocks. He said time worked for management and ought to join the docks. Miss Dora Finch in number 6 had once performed with dogs. She kept their photographs in frames and fed imaginary frogs. The twins in number 7 sold perfume door to door. One spoke every sentence twice, the other spoke once more. A young man lived in number 8 who never left his bed. He wrote complaints to famous men and signed them recently dead. Rooms above the arcade, thin walls, thicker lies. Everybody hears the truth, then politely shuts their eyes. Rooms above the arcade, buckets in the hall. Every private kingdom has somebody next door through the wall. Below us all night long, the Golden Crown performed. Bells announced victories no human being earned. Plastic rifles shot at wolves that rose without complaint. A mechanical boxer punched the air and never seemed to faint. The fortune woman lit her eyes. I fed her 20 pence. She said, you have a talent for confusing noise with consequence. I fed her 20 more. She said, a woman knows your name. I kicked the cabinet hard enough to tilt the game. The manager came running in slippers and a vest. He said, you theatrical gentlemen are worse than all the rest. wallpaper still carried a brown mark near the bed where I had thrown a bottle at something Helen said. The wardrobe held one wire hanger, 2 dead moths and dust. No red stagecoach, no secret script, no evidence of us. I remembered velvet curtains, I remembered candlelight. The room contained a kettle and a bulb too weak for night. Mrs. Vale appeared behind me, holding towels to her chest. She said, "You always were exhausting when you wanted to be blessed." I said, "Did I leave anything?" She said, "Several unpaid weeks. A girl crying on the landing, and a talent for speeches. Rooms above the arcade, every lock remembers hands. Every stain becomes a country when a lonely man expands. Then the building gave a shudder, and the golden crown went black. One machine continued ringing, then reluctantly gave back. The residents opened doorways, small faces in the gloom. For half a minute everybody stood outside their room. Mrs. Vale lit 3 candles and called each person by their name. You built a man from good reviews, bad sleep and borrowed jokes. You taught him how to enter rooms and leave through clouds of smoke. You gave him one convincing wound, a childhood painted gray, a careful little tremor when the questions turned that way. You dressed his fear as arrogance, his selfishness as drive, then sent him underneath the lights and called the trick alive. A costume full of strangers, buttoned to the throat. Every one of them had lines, every one of them could quote. A costume full of strangers, stitched beneath the skin. You spent so long becoming them, you forgot who let them in. There was the wounded working boy who hated wealth on cue. There was the educated clown who knew one book or two. There was the dangerous romantic, there was the faithful friend. There was the man who meant each promise till the promise reached its end. There was the drunk who spoke the truth, the sober man who lied, the fragile prince who needed love, then punished those who tried. A costume full of strangers, buttoned to the throat. Every one of them had lines, every one of them could quote. A costume full of strangers, sown with praise and gin. You spent so long becoming them, you forgot who let them in. Take off the clever one, he says he keeps you safe. Take off the tragic one, he uses grief for shame. Take red coat in my case, though I had left it years ago. Perhaps I packed it in my sleep, perhaps it learned to follow. I held it by the shoulders, like a body from the sea. The lining held the smell of rooms where people paid for me. I put one arm inside it, then pulled the arm away. Some doors are only exits when you choose not to stay. A costume full of strangers lying on the bed. Every one of them was hungry, every one of them was dead. A costume full of strangers, no applause, no violin. I did not need to murder them, I only stopped climbing in. The side door opened with a shove, and half the frame came free. A notice on the wall said, "Staff only, including me." The lobby smelled of plaster, wet carpet and old beer. The chandelier had lost enough to make the floor severe. Backstage, my dressing room door still carried one gold star. My name beneath was smaller than I remembered from afar. Inside, the mirror waited with 12 dead bulbs around. I sat before it carefully and listened to the building sound. Powder for the bruises, black around the eyes, white across the ordinary, red across the lies. Fasten every button, check the good side twice. Paint appear spontaneous, thumb properly precise. Ladies and gentlemen, residents and rain, Greyhaven's missing favorite son has missed you all again. Tonight without an understudy, tonight without restraint, I give you every man I was and several that I with my arms thrown open wide. The orchestra attacked the theme, the curtains multiplied. The balconies were crowded, the boxes overflowed. Every person I had failed had purchased the front row. Look at me now, I made it after all. I learned how to fly by rehearsing the fall. Look at me now, no debt, no delay. I turned everyone I abandoned into someone I could play. I played the boy at 17 who called his father small. I played the man at 30 who no longer called at all. I played the lover riding home from someone else's bed. I played the brave survivor of the wounds he always fed. The audience laughed on cue, they wept exactly where I placed the little silence that proved how much I care. Look at me now, I made it after all. I learned how to fly by rehearsing failed above me, then another, then the sound. The orchestra stopped playing, but no instrument was found. The balconies were canvas, the cheers became the rain, running through the broken roof and down the window pane. There was nobody watching, except a man in row 13, in a factory coat with oil on both hands and a face kept painfully clean. I said, "Dad," he said, "that's convenient." I said, "I came to put things right." He said, "You came to make a speech. You always come at night." I said, "You never understood me." He said, "You never stay." I said, "I wanted something larger." He said, "And did you get it made?" I said, "They knew my name in London." He said, "Did they know when you lied?" I said, "I couldn't live your life." He said, "You never even tried." I said, "You should have called me back." He said, "You wanted me to grieve." Then row 13 was empty, and I had nothing left to leave. No crowd, no father, no perfect final word, no evidence the dead return because the living need to be heard. No heaven in the doorway, no younger self backstage, no critic writing mercy in the margin of the page. So this is what remains of me without the careful art. I wanted to be noticed more than I wanted to take part. I called neglect devotion, I called cowardice escape, I called the truth too ordinary, unless I gave it shape. Don't look at me now, there's nothing to applaud. No beautiful disaster, no misunderstood. God, don't look at me now. Let the silence remain. Some things are not redeemed by explaining the pain. I removed the coat and folded it. No burning curse or plea. I laid it in the center where the leading man should be. Then from the back of the theater, one small house light came. I said my given name aloud. It sounded strange, it sounded mine. Outside the rain was the thinning on the roofs of Greyhaven. I left the final line unspoken and walked out before the end. At 6 the bakery opened, at 6:15 a bus, at 6:18 two councilmen discussed the state of us. A woman hosed the pavement outside the Golden Crown. The dirt ran towards the gutter without a once looking back around. The sky was losing color, the sea was losing rage. Greyhaven looked less tragic in the ordinary day. When the house lights rise, the magic does not die. It becomes wood, wire, paint, and somebody sweeping nearby. Mrs. Vale stood in the doorway with her cardigan pulled tight. She said, "You left your key upstairs." I said, "Keep it for the night." She said, "You mean forever?" I said, "Something close to that." She nodded like a woman who had heard much better acts. I asked if she remembered me before I went away. She said, "I remember everybody, I don't remember every day. When the house lights rise, the scenery looks small. That does not make it worthless, it only makes it a wall." Promenade was waking with deliveries and steam. No child had yet demanded that the machines produce a dream. The fortune woman's painted eyes were dark behind the glass. For once she had no future, and I had no need to ask. I passed beneath the marquee, the letters swung above. There was no message hidden there, no judgment and no love. Not every silence is wisdom, not every wound is art, not every road is destiny because you chose to start. Not every life is waiting for the courage to begin. Sometimes the door is only shut because nobody is in. The station clock said 7, the ticket office closed. The clerk asked, "Single?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Where?" I said, "I don't know." He waited with his pencil. I named the town at random. The name looked harmless on the card, no past attached, no anthem. The train arrived without ceremony, 4 carriages and steam. I took a seat beside the window and did not call it a dream. When the house lights rise, the audience is gone. You gather what belongs to you and leave the rest switched on. Greyhaven slipped behind me, the pier became a line. I watched until I lost it, then stopped trying to make the moment mean more than mine.